Hello, gentlemen.
All right.
Good to see
Hello.
you. Hello,
I
Kentucky. Chris, you don't sound great. You gonna be
Yeah.
okay?
Not great. Not great. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
hmm
Hello, Kentucky. Hello, Pennsylvania, Jerusalem, Naples, England, Romania. Wow. It's like always one of everyone here. Ohio. Hey, Patty. Netherlands, Salt Lake, London, California.
Ty writes hello from exile. That's a
Ty's
nice
in
one.
exile. Hello. Ty,
Huh.
say hello, say hi to everyone for us.
Nice.
They'll
hmm
remember us. Greetings from Michigan. It's fascinating how we always get one from everywhere. So
Wow.
even from exile. Great to see
I was
everybody.
about to
We
say even
have
from Michigan, but
what?
I was about to say even from Michigan, but exile is yeah.
Hi Dewey from Alabama. Okay, today we're talking about the borders of being, the search for self. We are three students of the wisdom of Kabbalah. We are always looking at what's going on in the world, what's going on in modern science, what's going on in all. If the whole point of the spiritual journey is to kind of leave all this, so why, like, right, like, is it Rabash or Bala Salam talks about the squirrel? I think it's Bala Salam, right? He's like, even a
A
little
squirrel?
squirrel. Yeah, I think he says squirrel, I think. It's Nai, right? He says, even a little
Yes,
squirrel, you
nice. A
open it up,
squirrel.
there's like 100 systems inside. There's 1,000 systems
Yeah.
inside there. There's billions of cells in there. There's
Yeah.
all of these complicated operations that are happening, even for this like little seemingly meaningless creature. So
Okay.
what is, if we're talking about spirituality, if we're talking about something so out of this world, why bother with all these details? Why don't we just agree to kind of leave it behind? Why are we in it? And what is the purpose of this place that we're in? And what do we learn about who we are? And how do we leverage leverage meaning fulcrum out of what was that called? It's leverage, right? How do we use it to find that exit? Um,
hmm
outside of it. And that's what we're doing here. That's what
Catapult?
this,
How about
yeah,
catapult?
catapult ourselves out of it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
hmm
that's what this conversation is about. Oh, we lost Chris. He also was having he gave us a warning about electricity that his
Yeah,
power was
Chris
going to
is
go.
both not feeling well and he might has there's a scheduled outage in his building. So let's just think about how much we want him
We'll
here
think
with
about it.
us. Yeah. All
Um,
right. So yeah, why do we need
so
all
that's
this?
that's what's
hmm
going on here. That's what we're interested in discovering through the lens of the wisdom of Kabbalah to understand what is this world we're living in, why, and how to process and interpret this experience. So speaking of this world, I was in the city yesterday when I finished working. I was hungry. Before taking the commute home, I sat down. It was Valentine's Day yesterday, just to prove that I'm in my own bubble. I'm sitting there alone while couples are streaming in and having this wonderful meal together. I was reading the article that you sent, the science, the around the science of the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there while all
The
the couples are
self.
having their wonderful meals. I'm getting ready to drive home, but I was just starving, hadn't eaten all day, so I'm in my own bubble there, reading about the self. So incredible brain science, and I think we'll probably get a chance to talk about it a little more. So much awesome insight and just very interesting things about
Yeah, it
who
makes you
we are
think.
and how this,
hmm
yeah. Um, so there's a part of the brain that's responsible for our appetite. It's mapped. There's different parts of the brain. You could say that right there, when I'm hungry or when I'm thirsty, this part gets active and does its thing. Recognizing faces, there's another part of the brain. It does its thing. Okay, I think looks like Chris is coming back.
All right.
Jones? Oh, hello. Where are
Oh,
you?
he immediately went to another dimension, and and he's talking
What
to
you're
us
gonna
from
get, I don't
another
know.
dimension.
We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, the visual cortex. There's a certain part of the brain which deals with what we see, and it's known where these different parts of the brain are. Also, that the left part of the brain controls the right part of the body, the right part of the brain controls the left part. In fact, one part of the brain hears instructions on what to do. The other part of the brain makes up the story about the instructions, which
Yeah,
is like
that's
another complete.
one of the mind-blowing things that's
Yeah, this
happening.
this
Yeah.
article was pretty incredible. By the way, last week somebody mentioned that we should do like a digest of all of the articles that we reference each week and all of
Leon.
the articles from the
Leon
Wisdom of
suggested
Kabbalah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, Leon. So Leon, if you're out there and you want a job, so send us a message. So I finished eating. I got in the car to drive home. Rush hour had passed. That was the strategy: eat and then let the traffic pass. And then so I had about an hour to drive home. I'd been working all day. I needed to decompress a little bit, shift my mind. So I put on something about music. There's this wonderful blind guitar player, and he was talking about like feeling music.
Mm.
The first, like within 2 minutes of the video starting, he starts talking about the brain.
Mm.
And he starts saying, when because these parts of my brain didn't develop, all of these other things became
Are
hidden, right?
compensating. The
Yeah,
other parts are.
I thought
Hmm.
to myself, like, that's interesting. Like, okay, I just read something and then just picked some random music video and he starts talking about the brain on a guitar video. Um, okay. So the video ended and I put on a recording. So for the rest of the last half hour of the ride home or something, the Rabash, the Kabbalist Rabash, the article that we're reading together in the morning lesson. So I put this on for the rest of my drive home just to kind of prepare for the lesson.
Yeah, just
And
maybe say a few words, but like Rabash is the one of the greatest Kabbalists, and you were talking about an article written by this great Kabbalist, the Rabash. Maybe not everyone knows. Yeah.
okay,
Okay. What happened?
hold on. Yeah, no, I'm not sure. Okay, everything, audio's fine, video's fine, everything's
No, no,
fine.
you're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay. So um, like the first thing that I hear, because we were reading from the middle of the article, I couldn't fine tune it. I just like I scrubbed through the middle of the article, and he says, when we learn, it's in the. He says every thought that's in your heart, and then he asks a question. He says, when you think in your mind. Why does it tell us that the thought is in the heart? And it starts talking about the mind, and he starts talking about when a person thinks this, he's thinking about it because this thought was sent to him. Like a person thinks, I'm thinking this now.
Hmm.
And Rabash in the article
Yeah.
very, very clearly says that when a person has such and such a thought, it's because that thought is sent to him. So I kind of stepped back at that moment and like laughed to myself at this delicate thread
Hmm.
that was weaved through the last like 2 hours of my life through the article to the music
Hmm.
thing to our discussion before
Yeah.
about this show and then to the article,
Uh-huh.
then to the blind guy playing music and then to this Kabbalistic article. And I realized that, there's this voice always going on in our head, like always. It doesn't stop. And if I was thinking, like if I was paying attention to a billboard, then the voice, we have tons of billboards here about lawyers, like if you get injured, injury lawyers, like, and I
I
always have
do.
plenty of thoughts about
I
that.
always notice them when I'm in the States. Somehow I
So
see
bad.
that
They're like
there's so
increasing.
many of them. This is
They're
it's
increasing like
so not
exponentially.
it's not
The same way
common in
technology is
Israel.
increasing
Yeah.
exponentially, those billboards of injury lawyers are increasing exponentially on the ride
Oh
home
my
from
God.
out of the
Uh-huh.
city.
Oh, and
So
also the radio ads too
I can't listen to
in the
radio.
States. When last time I was there, like we took a cab or something. And there was like a Leo and I. Anyway, long ride, a lot of radio, a bunch of these ads too. It's like,
It's
and they're
horrible. It's
it's,
horrible. Have you been hurt? Did maybe something happen
Morgan
to
and
you? Is
Morgan.
it
yeah.
possible
Morgan
somebody
and
said
Morgan.
something?
That's the one.
What?
Morgan and Morgan.
Uh,
Mhm.
I think the new one everywhere is like hurtinnewjersey.com or I got hurt in newjersey.com or something like that. And by the way, if anyone clicks on that, I hope we get a percentage, but we're not affiliated. We're not doing a product plug here. Um, But
Okay.
many times I've been
Mm-hmm.
driving home and I've seen those things and I've thought about them and thought how horrible it is that that's the state of our society. Like, and then I would be driving and then maybe think about something else and my mind would go there. And uh, the point is that I would have missed that delicate thread. I would have heard the article of Rabash. I would have heard this guy talking about guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't have seen all of these coincidences s- so connect and it made me think like, wow, there's probably infinite. Like every day, every moment
Mm-hmm.
should be like that. That if the voice of my head, um, if the voice in my head was focused was had a certain conversation, instead of just, oh, what about that billboard and what about this thing over here? But if the direction of the conversation was, I'm not exactly sure how to define where, then we probably see, or we would see how all these things are connected, how life is like the thing that makes everything seem disparate and not connected
Mm-hmm.
and individual would go away, and we'd see how each thing that we're going through in life, like Rabash says, that the thoughts are sent to a person. There's some thread. There's some connection between everything in our lives. What I want to point out before we dive into what is this self, there is either I am in control of all of my thoughts, like there's me and I'm in control of what's going on, or where do they all come from?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's say that there's this voice that's constantly running in everyone's head, and it never runs out of fuel. I'm going to just plant the
Right.
seed now and say that all those thoughts come from our desire. That's the fuel for those thoughts. Okay. So let's do an experiment for a second. Don't think of the number one. Okay, ready? Like you're in
I'm
control of
done.
your
That's
thoughts.
it. I
You're
can't do it
you're in
anymore.
control of your mind. Watch, ready?
You just
Ready?
told me what
Three.
I can't.
Try. You're in control of your mind, right,
Okay.
everybody?
Okay.
Three, two,
Impossible.
okay, impossible. So
Impossible.
if
Mm-hmm.
are we or are we not in control of what's going on?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean, it's such a. I think what we're talking about, it's such a. It is so counterintuitive to us that it needs a couple. We need a couple of time, to like reiterate what's going on here, so that everyone who's listening is like with us, because we're so intimately glued to this living life from the perspective of a self. The I, the me, the self, the ego, doesn't matter how you call it. This is how we feel the world. This is how we feel. There is the world through me. There is reality, everything that's
I'm
happening,
here,
and
I'm going towards these goals. I'm
exactly.
here, I need to deal with this today.
Exactly. We are the thinker of thoughts and the feeler of feelings and the doer of deeds. Right. We are, but is it really there? If everything really is happening like 3, 2, 1, meaning you're this feeler of feelings or doer of deeds or thinker of thoughts is just doing that automatically, then where are you? Where is the self? If the self is this automatic interpreter. By the way, one of the things this made me think about also is our interaction with ChatGPT. Like so in the recent few months, it became like my
Trade
one of
secrets,
my
trade
yeah
secrets.
one of my daily tools. Like I just use it for a bunch of in a bunch of ways. And it's really interesting because when you ask, one of the things that they kept saying, OpenAI and all those companies developing large language models like ChatGPT, is they're saying, look, be aware, it might make mistakes. it comes up with its own explanations. It comes up with its own reason. It's a reasoning tool. It's not a Wikipedia. Don't rely on everything that it says as factual. Just understand that it's a reasoning tool, and it's whatever you whatever you ask it, it'll come up with it with like a plausible explanation, but not necessarily one that's grounded in truth or in reality or in facts.
You know the expression. You know the
And
expression.
our
in the
mind
article,
works the same. That's the crazy thing.
You know the expression. It's lighter than my. The Shekhinah will say it's lighter than my head. It's in one of the articles. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
asked
nice one. Deep,
ChatGPT, I
super
said,
deep.
what does it mean when the sages say that it's lighter than my head? And it made up the biggest bullshit that had nothing to do at all with what it actually
Yeah,
means,
yeah.
but just based on like what it thinks it probably means based on what that
Right.
expression kind of
and
probably.
and that's what it's supposed to do, right? That this is the job of these tools. It's a reasoning tool. Actually, the creators of how the public uses it, the public just, okay, I can ask it whatever and it'll answer everything. So the common public, just kind of treats this just like we treat our brain. That we have a language center, like in the left part of our brain,
A
that
large
is
language center.
that is responsible for just, if you ask it a question, it can come up with an answer. It doesn't even matter if the answer is grounded in anything. And that's what these AI tools are doing, and it puts a mirror to our face. And I think this is part of something we were talking about months ago, that something our teacher was talking about years ago, that AI will actually just help us put a mirror in front of the human and understand and ask ourselves, oh, wait a minute, where are we? Where is the self? Where is the human if this thing does exactly what I'm doing? And now we're seeing that our brain is just an AI that's working, basically. It's a kind of an AI that is just like working. Let's talk about the split brain experiments for a second, because I think this will help
Break
our
it down nice
viewers.
and slow. It's just fascinating, and
It's
we'll be
really
able to build up
fascinating.
to the spiritual. Yeah.
Okay, I'll say what I remember from the article, and you'll complete me, because our friends who are listening haven't read the same article we were reading. It's about
And
some
let's
newer.
I'm going to find the name of the scientist too. So if Leon is going to put it in our digest,
Right.
you can put the science there.
So anyway, neuroscience basically shows, after many, many years, that they were looking for where is the part that defines the self or that correlates with the self. They thought it could be, maybe it's in the front or in the back or in the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere, the prefrontal cortex, something else. They tried all kinds of things to find it. Long story short, after many years, it turns out that the brain just always works like a network. There are always different regions of the brain working together in many different various functions and things that we do. You see the brain always working like a network, different parts working together. So the bottom line is there is no self region in the brain. Even though we feel like there's a self, we are a self, and we do the deeds and think the thoughts and feel the feelings and so forth. In the brain, at least, there is no region that you can isolate and say, here is the self. It lies in this part. There's no such thing. So that's the first thing. So we totally live like a self, but there's no neuroscience, at least, doesn't agree with it. Now, in split brain patients, which are patients that the cables that are connecting their left and right brain have been cut. This is
Wait, hold on
something
a sec. Hold on a sec.
yeah,
From the article it says
yeah,
in the research undertaken to and this research, by the way, won a Nobel Prize. So this is not just like some pop science. In the research
yeah.
undertaken to mitigate severe epilepsy, Sperry and
Gazaniga, I
Gazaniga.
think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
these
it's
two
a very,
scientists.
very known thing, the split brain experiments thing. They got a
Okay,
Nobel
they believe
Prize
that
for
by
it.
cutting
Yeah.
the brain, they would be able to control the different parts of the brain. So that's where this comes from.
Yeah, so you have all these patients, epilepsy patients, that they through a complicated surgery, brain surgery, they cut the connection between their left brain and their right brain, and they were right that it would help with their assumption that it would help with their seizures, and it did. But now you have split brain patients, and they also ran all kinds of experiments, and crazy things happened because, like Seth mentioned before, our brain is wired in such a way that the left hemisphere basically controls what is happening in the right side of our body, and vice versa, right? So it turns out that when in split brain patients, what happens is that you can present a word to their right brain, right? Which means you would do it through the left eye, right? So you show them a word, you don't say it, you show it, a word like walk, and then when their right brain sees that word through the left eye, they will go up and go out and start walking. But if you ask them, why did you walk? Then they wouldn't say because you showed me a word that told me to walk, because their two brains are disconnected. So they come up instead, they don't just say, I have no idea. Their left brain comes up with a plausible explanation which they themselves believe in. And they will say, oh, I had to just go to the bathroom. I'm walking to the bathroom now. And now the person is certain that this is what they're doing. And they tried this in various ways, even laughing, right? So they show the right brain the word laugh, and then the person starts laughing, and then they ask the person, why did you laugh? And he says, I remembered a joke that was funny. And they're certain that this is what happened. Now, this is really weird, right? And we think about it as like, oh, this is like so far from an ordinary person. No, it's not. This is the crazy thing, that we are doing it all the time, even though our two
Give
brains
some examples of like how we're
connected.
doing it on a daily
Can
basis.
you? So sure. So there's an inner chatter that goes on in your brain all the time.
Like you're in the market and you see a person and you start
Exactly.
making a story about that person, or you like
Exactly.
everything, right?
You
You
build
hear
a
someone's talking.
narrative of around everything and anything. Your left brain has this constant need to explain reality to yourself in words, in a logical, textual way, just like what AI is doing. This is the crazy, the crazy thing. Now, the why is it relevant to what we're talking about? What's the big thing here from a spiritual perspective? It helps us see that this whole thing is that's not the self. That's not really us. That's just a machine that's working, and we are.
Explain it. Can you explain it a little more? Like,
Yeah.
I want everyone to feel like
Okay.
this viscerally.
Okay.
That like this is what's happening. Like each person should feel, yeah, oh, I recognize it in my life.
Okay, so there's a term that our teacher once used, and I think it's very helpful. He once he doesn't use it frequently, but there was a couple of times where he mentioned that we should look at life as if through an expert point or an expert system, or sometimes he called it the observer point. So there is everything you're going through, and there is the feelings that you feel, and there is also the thoughts that you think, through which you explain to yourself what is happening. And all of that is, let's say, a level below another point higher, deeper, that only observes what is happening. And so, how can you notice this? If you try to be less attached to your thoughts, and you understand it's just your brain chatter going off automatically,
It
explaining
happens after you're
reality.
sick, like after you're really sick,
Oh,
or if
that's
you've
a
been to like
good
a
one.
funeral or
That's a good
something like
one.
that, and you come
Yeah.
back to life, you feel like you're not like in the same world that everyone else is.
Right. So And going back to your example with the Rabash article, the Kabbalistic texts that we read on a regular basis, they train us in separating our observer point, let's say, our that inner seeker that tries to understand our true point that experiences reality from all kinds of automatic and egoistic thoughts that are happening in us that we are not in control of. And that gives you this sort of expert perspective, this additional perspective. I don't know if I did a good enough job
That just
explaining
reminds me
it,
of
but
maybe of a lot of the time. Can you hear me? Okay, I just want
yeah,
to say like two
yeah,
things.
yeah. You
That just
sound
we
you
didn't
sound
really
really
tie
sick,
this.
but yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say a couple words. It reminds me of this comparison that we've maybe mentioned before, but it wasn't even that clear. Now it feels like it's clear when we talk about making calculations with bitter and sweet and true and false.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, the neuroscience finds interesting points here in terms of how language works and how the brain functions and trying to map the stuff that we do with the areas in our brain. Sure, but Kabbalists are actually talking about this in a much more conclusive way. There's an entire nature that we have that is not really us. It's not just your thoughts. It includes your deepest desires, your passions, your plans and hopes for life, your aspirations, your long-term ideas about what to do in life and what you'll be when you grow up or when you grow old or whatever it is. All of that is not even you. And this is why this is, it's controversial, and I think it's also hard for people to it takes some development, some inner
Imagine,
development
let's make
to,
it super
yeah.
simple.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you're at a party or you're at a
Okay.
place with, say you're at a party, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of people and you're having a pretty good time. Maybe parties are not your thing, but you're there, everyone's enjoying, right? And it's the end of the night. Someone comes over to you and says, "You see, Mary's husband, Mark over there? You know that Mark is like sells life insurance. You know that he like took emptied uh Susan's mother's bank account before she died, wrote this policy, like nobody really knows, but like that's really how he. And meanwhile, Mark's like walking around giving everyone drinks, and you've been having a great time with him, laughing over singing at the piano and stuff. All of a sudden, you find out that really this guy
Uh-huh.
like does his thing by like robbing old people kind of legally to this thing. All of a
Did you
sudden,
come
like
up with it
your whole
yourself?
I was trying to think of something better, but it's the best thing I could come up with right now. The point is, like, when you find a piece of information,
Mm-hmm.
like everything changes. Nothing
Everything
changes in the
changes. Yeah.
room. Everyone is there. Everyone's the same. All the same
But
exact
you're in a different
activities are
reality.
happening.
But you're in a different
All of a
reality.
sudden,
Yeah.
your face gets hot. You can't stand it. You just want like everything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the exact same world, but all of a sudden, the whole thing changes. And um, in that article, in that Rabash article, he actually in the let's shift from that. Let's just say like this. A person, imagine you're like you have like some umbilical cord into some bubble around you. That's that's kind of how we live. There's a bubble around each of us. But the bubble is not limited by a physical place. Like you were in the exact same room with all the exact same people and all the exact same things on the table. There's some kind of energetic bubble around us, which could expand to another country or wherever. There's no limit to it. It's more than that. It's at the speed of thought, or we could say. And we have some umbilical cord. It's called in spirituality, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, it's called we nurse from it
Mm-hmm.
from that sphere that we're in. So depending on that, so I was in one sphere in that room. Something happened to me. It shifted, and now I'm in a a different shaped, different quality sphere, and I'm nursing off of it. Like that tube is stuck into me. Like maybe like it's like a matrix, like in the back of the head, you know. And now my thoughts, my desires. I'm driving home. I'm like realize my knuckles are white from squeezing the steering wheel, thinking about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we need so this is something fundamental that the wisdom of when we think about the self, we typically think the self is living, you know, somewhere inside of here. Wisdom of
Yeah.
Kabbalah is saying you're really inside of some sphere somewhere with some umbilical cord, and you're suckling off of some greater self, you could say, some other.
Ooh, are we going there? Okay, let's go there. Yeah. No, because because I thought, Seth, you think that these are the kinds of things that are not so attractive for people to hear about. I'm
What is
trying
that people don't have any free will?
for
Don't
example.
tell everyone they don't have free will. They're not going to watch the show.
No, but even if we go deeper to ask deeper questions about the self, I mean, what does this neuroscience, for instance, shows you? What does it mean that there's no self region in the brain? What does it mean that we have these automatically working models within us that give explanations about the world? All of that is basically saying that the self that we think of as our whole being, at the very least, it raises the question, is it even there? Is it even there? Is there even a real self? Or the whole concept of self is a kind of an illusion? And if you go beyond neuroscience and just look at nature, look at all of science, what we're discovering more and more, if you put together all of the findings of all scientific research in all fields, ultimately what you're piecing together is the picture of a single reality. It's very clear that from nature's point of view, there's no biology and astrophysics and mathematics and psychology and neuroscience. Nature's one. It's one system. We isolate it and differentiate it into different pieces, and we say we try to isolate certain regions and study them, just like we think about ourselves as separate selves, separate individuals. But technically speaking, ultimately, there is no separate self. There is nothing separate in reality. There's nothing separate in nature. You can't really isolate even the farthest atom on the farthest galaxy and say, oh, that's an isolated atom. It has nothing to do with the rest of the universe. No, clearly the universe is one interconnected whole. And that includes us human beings. And so there, objectively speaking, there is no separate self. And yet, if we to be realistic, let's be real, we totally feel like we are separate selves. So what's going on here? We have no real idea about what is who we are, who we truly are. Bala Salam says beautifully in one of the articles we read, preface to the Book of Zohar. We're the article we're reading these days with our teacher. We don't even know the essence of ourselves. We don't need to know the essence of anything. Essences are beyond our reach because we can't even get to the point where we see outside of the illusion of separate things. And so, what's going on here? Like, what is the nature of this illusion of the self? Now we can go into how was it created and why, but that's already how deep we want
Let's
to
try
go.
to
Where do we
understand
want to go?
yeah,
Yeah,
let's understand.
yeah.
Let's understand a little bit more about what's purpose it's serving and what it's doing there. Because, okay, we're saying, okay, well, you think the self is you think that voice is you. It's not. Not, isn't that cool? We just told you that's not you, but that's not enough. Like, let's understand
Can
what
can
it
can
is.
we can we jump into another somewhat related item and maybe try
Let's
to
do it.
put the things together. Okay, so there's this. We don't need to go into this in a too detailed way, but they're developing now this non-opioid, non-addictive painkiller that works in a different way to reduce pain. It blocks pain signals from even reaching the brain. That's like the idea. It's not yet certain that they'll be able to do it. They're working on it. Why am I bringing it up? Because when we think of our sense of self, we have to consider, and this also ties into what Chris brought up a couple of minutes ago, we have to consider how we experience the self, how we experience our existence, and we experience it through pleasure and pain, ultimately. Pleasure and pain are the two, direct reins or shaping forces, let's say, that shape the self. All that we are essentially is a certain entity that moves away from pain and moves towards pleasure, and those concepts of what's pleasurable and what's painful are constantly changing, defining the self. Think about that party that you said, right? So it was really pleasurable to see Scott, or what name you came up with? Mark, right? It was really so fun. It was pleasurable. But then a moment after you heard what Mark does for a living, now it became really painful to be in the same, to think about yourself interacting with that person. So what changed in yourself, if not your definitions of pain and pleasure? That's what changed. And so I'm sorry, I can't remember where we started this discussion, but where we wanted to go.
You wanted to take a leap to a different.
Right. So the self is clearly malleable. It is being dynamically shaped by the forces of pain and pleasure. That's why also it brings up a lot of questions. Do we think they'll actually succeed in creating a drug that prevents human beings ultimately from feeling pain? Doesn't pain have a purpose? Did nature made us feel pain, not just us, all the creatures that we know, and they feel pain in some way, even the vegetative level. You could argue even the inanimate levels. Is it possible to feel the self?
There is new research
without feeling pain. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just there is new research I heard about plants making noises. I think in Tel Aviv even this is something that came out of there. They make noises, and the more stressed they are, the more noises they make. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
vegetarians are going to be left eating sand.
So
until they have the science that discovers that even sand cries.
Yeah, they'll get there too. If you talk to we have a friend who's an astrophysicist, and the way he talks about supernovas and galaxies, things like that, he literally sees them as living beings and living cosmological phenomena, even though they're clearly inanimate. But for them, he sees it. There's a birth, growth, maturation, decline, and death for stars. There are different stages, cosmological stages, of these celestial beings. There are also kinds of beings. Anyway, what is the relationship between pain and pleasure and the construct of self? Clearly, it is a very intimate one. Your self is not outside of pain and pleasure and like looking at it. We are completely shaped by those pain and pleasure experiences that we always have. But that makes you then think: what is there a self? If all I am is, is this?
There's an experience of 100% awareness, everything is existing. What I feel and tell a story about is, what enters inside this city here, this body here. Whatever
Uh-huh.
goes in, that's what I tell a story about. So when the information about the guy who was stealing money from people's mothers came in, like it changed my experience. But all of the information, all of the experience already exists out there. It's just what comes into the system that makes it how I affect. And people always report in psychedelic experiences or in
Mm-hmm.
near-death experiences
Mm-hmm.
that different kind of spiritual experiences that they experienced what was out, like let's say the skin, even in the wisdom of Kabbalah, we have not even in the wisdom of Kabbalah when it describes the sphirot, I guess horizontally instead of vertically, you know, the skin is this outer border, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
these five layers, and the skin
Mm-hmm.
is where it ends, and so there's a whole experience going on outside the skin where most of all of the information and experience in the entire reality exists. And then there's the reality that exists inside my skin, which is like
Mm-hmm.
I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm at work, I'm thinking about that guy who steals money from people's mothers, or whatever's going on inside. But most everything that's going on in Bombay, or that's going on in Brasilia, or that's going on in the North Pole, it's not. I'm
Right.
not feeling it inside of here.
Basically, if it's outside of my skin, it's typically outside of my field of view and feeling and perception of reality.
Right. So comes the wisdom of Kabbalah, and somebody. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because somebody, I can give credit where
Mm-hmm.
credit is due here. Somebody said something about the five parts of the soul or something. We need to describe. We need to explain choice times, and I think the way to describe this is to talk about the five levels of the soul. What is the soul? Person's not born with a soul. Well, he's born with an animate spirit. We all have that. And when that leaves, the body isn't animated anymore. And when that's in a person or an animal, for example, is animated. That's clear. That's some level. The spiritual soul we're talking about is this, first of all, it needs to be created, but it's this empty vessel. And the idea is we just talked about all of experience, most of all of the experience. Let's say a spark is inside of us. That's what we live from. But most of everything is taking place outside of us, in Bombay or across the galaxy or in some other
Mm-hmm.
universe, some other place. In order to feel it, we have to take the light, the experience, outside of us and move it inside of us. Where does it go inside of us so that I can feel it, so I can use it, so I can be part of it? It goes into a vessel called the soul. And the more that I take the light that's the experience outside of me and put it inside, this is called the different degrees of the soul, the 5 degrees of the soul. So I'm taking until all of reality, which is outside of me, when I'm done the entire process, I feel that you could say the boundary of my heart has expanded to include, not that my actual physical skin gets
Mm-hmm.
bigger,
Mm-hmm.
but that the outside reality now lives inside of me. And now my perception. So, like this silly example I gave at the beginning, where I read something about the brain, and then I turned something on and heard something about the brain, and then I listened to an article and it mentioned something about the brain, meaning there is some completely integral whole reality. And I just for a second saw some small thread running through it. But the more that we bring that existence that's happening outside of us into that place called the soul, then our experience of what life is totally changes, obviously, completely.
Because the definition of self changes. If you
Okay,
include
so
the yeah.
self. Now we're talking about self again. Okay, we're back to the purpose of the show. So self.
Right. I mean that our whole premise here is that is basically to discuss the borders of being. What are the borders of being or the borders of the self? All that we're talking about in spiritual development, in Kabbalistic practice, is about expanding the borders of the self, basically expanding the borders of your being. Now, you might encounter it in the texts in words like coming out of yourself, coming out of the self. What it means is that you come out of a very limited kind of border, and you go and expand to a much bigger border. Um, so the ultimately, uh, there's a beautiful parable from allegory of Bala Sulam in can't remember exactly where it's from, but he talks about how the this transformation between feeling reality in yourself and feeling reality outside of the self is like becoming reconnected, reattached to a body of which you are an organ. And so the body and all its organs, he says, are one. So there's the body exchanges sensations with each of its organs, and the body knows the totality of the body, knows if there's a problem with one of the organs, and everything the organ does is part of the totality of the body. But then imagine what happens if the organ is severed from the body, and now the organ feels like it's not part of the body anymore, right? And so the organ has its own authority. This state in Kabbalah is called two authorities or two domains. We live in such an existence where we are in the domain of the self. We are in our own authority. But coming out of the self means reconnecting to a single authority, meaning there is the totality of the body. It's either there is a self, meaning you're inside yourself, or you're in the whole. That's why they
But
called, yeah. Go ahead.
when we go through our life, uh, we're mostly miserable, and we're mostly uh, identifying with this very small self, right? What am I going to eat next? What am I doing after work?
Yeah.
What about that rash on my leg? Everything. Me, 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 me. We don't see the connections between everything. When this
Mm-hmm.
boundary, and also I don't see like I'm gonna pee in this river here. I don't see that like that's the water coming back into into my faucet, right? We don't understand. I'm just gonna pollute over here. I don't understand. That's what's getting into the soil that my food is growing out of. When the boundary expands more, it's almost like even from the level of like self-preservation, I feel that you are me. I can't hurt you. Like I don't I'm reattached to the body. I understand, oh, I'm an organ
Mm-hmm.
of the same body as you, and
Mm-hmm.
if I'm harming you, I'm harming me.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
more that it starts, it's we never really did a show about like illegal immigration in the U.S., but also we said at the beginning of the show about, and we don't, let's not get like totally diverged here,
Okay.
but we do look at what's going on in the world as a like contemporarily, and it means something when you have this lens from the wisdom of Kabbalah. Would you let anyone, let's start with a very small boundary. Would you let somebody you didn't know come into your family's bedroom? Probably not.
Probably
Somebody
not.
from another country just arrive and just come into your bedroom. Could be a good person, maybe not. But in general, I'm going to say stay outside and let's introduce ourselves. And, maybe after a few years, you can, would you let someone in your house? Would you let somebody you didn't know from another country into your town? Would you let people into your country? So like there's these boundaries starting very close
Mm-hmm.
and intimate and getting bigger and bigger. And like even now, how we see how people are moving from country to country. Like on the one hand, like what's going on, right? Europe is like filling up with all different people who were like quickly. The US, millions of people, like the border is open. So it's interesting because I thought I was me. Now I'm all of a sudden I need to incorporate all of these other people from all like I'm talking like now I'm switching back to the spirituality. Like
Okay.
I thought myself was me. Now all of a sudden I have to somehow open this boundary inside of myself to include the world inside of me. I have to include everyone inside of me. And then I'm looking at my country, for example, and it's like broken open and like people are flowing in. And it's like I have to accept. So there's these
I would
processes
say
like
I would
how
say
do
one
you
thing. I would say one thing that I think helps tie these things together, and hopefully without a lot of confusion. Because this is what you brought up is very confusing. I think this could be very
it's part of my
confusing. But I mean,
strategy.
yeah. But one of the things that like a rule of thumb or a principle of correct human development that Kabbalists give us is that correct development, meaning development towards the state called in Kabbalah the final correction, which is the final incorporation of all the selves into a single whole. Okay, let's think about it like that. To get there, we have to get there from the inside out. That's a very important thing, meaning that we can't try to impose or force or reform anything in our external reality without matching it with an expansion of the borders of self from the inside. In simpler words, what I mean is that you and the person you don't know should be closer to each other externally, physically, economically, diplomatically, doesn't matter. For that external connection to work, you need to be connected in your hearts. You need to both of you expand your borders of self and incorporate with each other and see each other as pieces of a single system. Then you can build external interactions that will hold water and that will be, and this is
And so what
something so important because if we don't understand that, this is what Bala Salam calls world reformers. We just try to fix things and push people to other places and force people to be open to accept everyone. This is just an unrealistic trying to take some lofty principles of openness and connection between everyone and force them on separate selves, on creatures that feel as separate selves, and that doesn't work.
with this
Well,
experience
what
of
else
pain
did the
also? Oh, go ahead, Chris. Well, if you're going to get 5 words out of you, let's hear it.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me. Well, I mean, what else did that research say? It mentioned the suffering of a person, and you're also talking about now. First of
Oh,
all,
good point.
when I'm watching the show, what am I thinking? Like, why is it important? Why is it important that I know what the self is, the real self? I'm good, So first of all, you have to answer why is it important to a person. But second of all, I guess you can get there by way of suffering. Like suffering is always important to a person, so you can always start.
Did we lose
What
the last
happened?
few words there?
Chris, I lost your, yeah, I did.
Doesn't matter. Keep going.
No, we want to hear it.
No, just say the last sentence again. Just wrap it again.
I just that suffering is usually what a person's ready to pay attention to. So that's usually
Mm.
what gets their attention first. So if you
Wait,
want
wait.
to know
Yeah.
why is it important to discover the self, then you can always start with.
Hmm.
This also goes to if you block a person from feeling any pain, then you can't, you're unable to
Yeah.
develop correctly because you can't.
Yeah, I don't think. By the way, I'm just giving my speculation. I don't think that they're going to be able to do it um, without some counter effect that will not work. I mean, there's an interesting on the flip side of it, on the pleasure side of it. There's an interesting documentary I saw a couple months ago about sugar. How there's actual sugar in our world, and then there is all of the sugar replacements. There's a bunch of them. There's all kinds of chemical names for them, and they appear in our foods and so on. But for a lot of reasons, you can't actually replace what sugar does to you, both in terms of flavor and in terms of its like effect on you from an evolutionary biology perspective and so forth. And it's very interesting because what they were trying to do, creating sugar replacements, is to get rid of the problems that come with excess amounts of sugar and still keep the good, sweet flavor of it. And the brilliant minds, the best scientists of today can't figure this out. There seems to be, and it's interesting. I think the same thing will happen with pain. We can't. We won't. I don't think we'll be able to change these things to the point that they don't affect us, because they define our
It's like a
self.
person. It's like
Yeah.
it's like the a person first time you have sex. You're like, why would anyone do anything else besides this all the time? But like without doing all the rest, or like when the first time you do drugs, you're like, I just want to feel like this all the time. Or you get drunk, you're like, this feels great. Like, I just want to be like this all the time. But
Right, and actually, it
there's
doesn't even matter what you do. Whatever you do, you get used to it. Whatever you do, you get used to it. This is called hedonic adaptation in psychology, meaning there's a baseline level, and even if you go up, you match it again, and because there's a problem, there's an inherent problem in our attempt to be limitless. It can't happen to have unbounded pleasure, to have no pain at all. This cannot happen in a separate self. For that, you need to be whole. You need to be complete. You need to be
That's where the pain
comprised
ends.
of all opposites. That's where pain ends, where there's wholeness, where there's perfection, where all the pain doesn't disappear, but it becomes a vessel for pleasure. It becomes a bedding, a foundation on which good feeling can reside, and then the good and the bad become one, a single whole. And so all this science is just, to me, I mean, to us, I think, from a Kabbalistic perspective, it just kind of shows you that gradually, from another angle and another angle and another angle, human beings are like being pushed to see that the existence we actually really all want is beyond the body and beyond the self, beyond the limited separate self, in some bigger self that includes all of us as one. And so the borders of being are far beyond what we think of as the current self that we're in. I got this was I can see that our time is almost up, but I just want to say this was a really good kind of discussion between us. Also,
We're gonna need a part two.
I was just about to say, on Sunday, I'm going to go deeper on this topic or similar in a Kabbalah Explained Simply session on Sunday.
Can you put a link somewhere for everyone?
There on the channel,
Can you
on the
put a link in
YouTube
the chat?
channel,
Okay.
you'll see it there. So this
What's the
was
name of
like a
it?
good
What's the name of the
preparation.
session?
It's gonna be the illusion of self. So we're gonna go deeper into that. So if you're interested, anyone who's listening, on Sunday, we're gonna do another dive into this. Yeah, can I
Chris,
actually?
everyone's wishing you. Well,
Yeah,
can
I
you,
got a quote from our teacher, Dr. Lightman, that I'm going to. It's part of the stuff I want to go deeper into on Sunday, but maybe just as an ending for our show, just to read it could be interesting. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Okay, so check this out. So our teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Lightman, says this: focus on how to penetrate the spiritual world. Your existence there begins when the self ceases to exist. When you stop existing in your current form, you appear there. The point of no self exists in a new space, which it feels as a very solid field that vitally fills everything. But with respect to the previous state, my egoistic self, it can be called no self, and it fills you with joy. So, there's a lot to aspire to.
Friends, we'll be here next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Chris, you got a few dozen get well wishes over here. Yeah, everybody wants you to feel better. Saf, the last 3 times I tried to play a song from this location, it sounded crap. Can you play from there?
Oh, that's a good point. Give me a second, cause I have to. Can I
If not,
download this?
let's go out without a song then.
No, I think I
Just
got
sounds
it.
terrible from here.
Um,
And
yeah.
X something X says everyone needs to eat sweet potatoes. Cointa says outstanding. Yetzi, hello, Yetzi. Thank you. And Anima and Julie and Valentine. Wonderful. Great to see everyone. Julie. Hi, Patricia. Oh, Raymond has a question. Does suffering allow us the opportunity to rise above reason?
Say it again.
Okay, he's going to have to stay tuned till next time. Does suffering allow us the opportunity to rise above reason?
Deep. There. That's.
Also,
Yeah.
like,
Not in 1 second. Yeah.
yeah,
What,
there's
what?
also, Chris, a question here about closed captions. A technical question. All right, Asaf, if it's too hard to play, so let's just we'll go out without the sound then.
How's this? Can you hear this?
Yep.
Yeah? No, I don't know if you do.
Yeah, we hear it.
You
Everyone is
hear it?
patiently waiting while we heard that.
Heard or hear?
Here.
Okay.
Teach me how to dance with you.
Well,
Teach me
one
how
dance
to
with everybody.
listen